Based on the great new book Uncovering Mindfulness, In Search of a Life More Meaningful, we bring you a new series of podcasts called From Mindfulness with Love by Paul Mudd, the author. Here's today's podcast. We hope you enjoy.
Are you in search of a life more meaningful? Welcome to the podcast that takes you from mindful to mindful. Leadership, resilience, compassion, success. Join the journey. From Mindfulness with Love, here's your host, Paul Mudd.
In our previous podcast in this series From Mindfulness with Love, we looked at what is mindfulness, and I hope you found it useful. But here's something else before we go on to look at the brain and mindfulness, and it's a bit of a puzzle. If mindfulness is a goalless activity where you are not searching for anything, but are just being present in the moment, with nowhere to go and nothing to do, isn't that counterintuitive and contrary to what many of us are brought up to believe? That is, the point of life is to get somewhere in the world, not to go nowhere. As I said, a bit of a puzzle, and I think if you're going to have a problem with the whole idea of mindfulness, this is where you might get a bit stuck, albeit temporarily. How can this really quite simple thing, and what we are talking about at this most basic level is sitting quietly, focused on the present, grounded in your own body, taking notice of your body's senses as you breathe and allowing your thoughts to come and go. Well, how can this achieve all that's being claimed? How can this really make such a difference? Well, things have happened over the past few years that have turned everything on its head. What once we thought and believed about the brain is now not true. But why so? Firstly, a discovery, and it's actually such a discovery that it's been described as the most important breakthrough in the understanding of the brain and its relationship to the mind since the beginning of modern science. And that discovery is that the brain is in fact neuroplastic. That's right, neuroplastic, which means it is not immutable and something that becomes fixed at a certain point in childhood. You'll have probably heard of the old Jesuit saying, "Give me a child till 7 and I'll show you the man." Well, putting the sexism of that statement aside, it's also complete and utter baloney. The brain is not unregenerative. It can be rewired. The relationships between our neurons and our brain, and the brain has as many neurons as the Milky Way has stars, and that's around 500 billion, can be re-energized and new neural pathways formed. It is possible to change the way we think and act, and our genes, hormones, and upbringing do not seal our fate. And the reason we now know all of this is because of the second thing I want to tell you about, and that is the new technologies that we now have to see deep inside the brain and witness these changes as they happen, and which we can measure the extent of these changes after they've happened. This is technology such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, EEGs, chemical neuroimaging, and positron emission tomography, or PET. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, for instance, has detected changes in the brain resulting from how mindful meditation impacts on attention. And as our minds wander, or are prone to wander, around 47% of the time, and we rarely, if ever, give anything our full attention, this is pretty good news, don't you think? The brain is without question a wonderful thing. It is in fact the most complex organization of matter we know of in the universe. The oldest part of it, the inner brainstem, also known as the reptilian brain, dates back over 400 million years, whilst the newest part, the sort of newbie on the block, and that's called the neurocortex, is around 200 million years old. That's right, only 200 million years. But the brutal truth is, it's being overstimulated by the modern world, the demands of technology, the way we work, the way we live, how we are. In the next podcast, I'll be asking, what do we need a mindful revolution for? And looking at some killer facts, as I call them, that show just how great this overstimulation is and what the consequences and effects can be. Continuing with our look at the brain and mindfulness, though, the German poet Goethe said to the philosopher Schiller, "The more I know, the less I understand." And never a truer word spoken. For another simple fact is that in seeking to understand the world around us, we use information from multiple sources. But in reality, we are capable of processing only around 9 pieces of the several million stimuli that surrounds us at any one time. Couple that with the fact that on average we have between 12,000 and 50,000 thoughts every day, although admittedly about 95% are on the same thing. We are without doubt, from the outside in and the inside out, enveloped in chatter and in constant motion and commotion. 1 in 5 people report feeling unusually tired, yet wired at the same time, and wake up from their sleep wondering whether they've actually slept at all because of the constant narrative buzz that's been running in their minds all night. Perhaps you recognize this in yourself. In one recent survey of 38,000 British employees, 15% said they never felt refreshed by their sleep, whilst the Royal College of Psychologists estimate that actually around 20% of us will be unusually tired at any given time. Whilst the brain accounts for just 3% of our body mass, it uses 20% of our energy, which is quite literally enough to light an electric bulb. But what mindfulness does is rebalance things. It calms and refreshes the mind, bringing clarity and focus. By improving sleeping patterns and helping you to achieve a slower, more relaxed alpha state, and ultimately the theta or dream state, which in turn helps build resilience and emotional intelligence and mental stamina. And by stimulating areas of the brain such as the prefrontal cortex, which is where we plan, make decisions, and form our judgments. And that's no bad thing either, when we find that 90% of mistakes in life are down to what is called solid thinking, being unable to make good judgments and not being able to change our minds. With the latest technology, we can also see that just spending 10 minutes a day over an 8-week period practicing mindful meditation reduces the size of the amygdala in our brains, which controls the fight and flight responses, making us less prone to overreact or lose our temper. Only 10% of our personality is drawn from genetics. 90% is learned behavior, and the way we think and act is not set in stone from childhood. For me, that is compelling stuff, and we've clearly got everything to play for. So let's bring the mindful revolution on, and let's look at it in our next podcast. But don't let that stop you reading ahead, and my book, Uncovering Mindfulness, In Search of a Life More Meaningful, is available on Amazon. You can also follow the continuing journey on Twitter at The Mindful Book, and that's capital T, capital M, capital B. And if you want to contact me directly, email me at paul@themudpartnership.co.uk, all lowercase, and of course, mud with 2 Ds. I'd love to hear from you. Until the next time, viva la revolution. Hell yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and leave a review. We want your feedback. Help us support your journey uncovering mindfulness in search of a life more meaningful. From Mindfulness with Love, we'll catch you next time.